Welcome to StartupHakk. I'm Spencer Thomason, and here at StartupHakk, we love to train software developers and build custom software solutions. So I do a lot of work as a fractional CTO. With over a decade of executive leadership and a solid 25 years in software development, I've mastered the art of transforming technology, teams, and products. So I got a comment from a user, and it sent me into some research that as a business owner, software developer, and frankly as a US citizen, makes me a little terrified. So I want to dive into this today, and I think this is a lot of the impact that we're seeing on layoffs, and it's interesting that more people aren't talking about it, and I appreciate these kind of comments, love these, and so let's dive into these today. All right, so again, I'm a little surprised that we haven't heard more about this. And I'm going to go over this comment because I want to read this comment verbatim. And I'm going to read this comment, and then we'll dive in to kind of what I did some research based on this, and I kind of want to see what your guys' thoughts are of this. So let's dig into this a little bit here. So I'll make this a little bit bigger so we can see this. Whoops, not that big. All right. So I got this comment from anonymous 49125. But I'm going to read it for you here because I think this is a really important thing. And one, I really appreciate it. You notice that I replied back to him right away. I actually reply personally to all of my comments. So none of my teams or anything, I do all of that. So he says, I think multiple things can be true. AI, recession, constant tech blunders, metaverse, NFT, etc. But I think they're all nothing compared to Section 174. So Section 174 is a new tax law in the U.S. that creates a tax liability on developer salaries. It went into effect right as the mass layoffs started. How it works: before Section 174, if you spent $1 million on a developer salary and made back $1 million in profit for that year, you would break even and owe nothing in taxes. However, now after Section 174, if you spent $1 million and made $1 million back, then you pay taxes on 80% of that $1 million. 20% of the $1 million you spent is $200K, and you can write that off against the $1 million you made. So $800K is taxable income. So you pay roughly $250,000 in taxes on that $800K. But what if you have a flop, a la an NFT, a metaverse, etc.? Let's say you spend $10 million on developer salary, then you make $5 million back. Well, according to the IRS, you owe them a total of $1 million in taxes. 20% of $10 million in dev salaries is $2 million that you can write off against the $5 million profits, which means $3 million is still taxable, which at a normal tax rate is about $1 million owed. So not only are you in the red and have a lost $5 million, but additionally you need to pay $1 million on top to the government because they said so. Proof is in the pudding. The second that tax liability became active, that's the second mass firing started. Other things can also be driving the mass tech layoffs, but this is the biggest reason, he says. So again, I'm just reading it from his comment here, and then we're going to dive into some of my research. So each dollar they spend on salaries is just 80 cents they can't write off on whatever comes back in profits. Also, only being able to write off 20% of salaries against profits is the charitable number. It can be as low as 6% if they're not domestic developers. If anyone disagrees, which most people are quick to minimize the impact of some sweeping tax implications, show me proof to the contrary. Nobody ever does. And if you don't, then your opinion is not only unsubstantiated, not only illogical, but demonstrably wrong. So I thought this was really interesting. So I'm gonna dive in and kind of show some of the research that I did. So Section 174 has fundamentally changed the financial landscape for tech companies, leading to increased tax liabilities and widespread layoffs. By understanding the implications of this law and adopting strategic measures, companies can mitigate its impact and continue to thrive. It's also crucial for Congress to address this issue caused by 174 to support the growth and competitiveness of the tech industry. This is something that was going to get fixed, and then it didn't. So let me kind of give you a little bit of background from what I found in my reading. And there's a particular blog article here we're going to go through as some of this, right, to kind of talk a little bit about this. And I'm going to put that link to the blog article down below because this Gregory here does a really good job of explaining this. And so I'm going to go through some of it. But Section 174 of the Internal Revenue Code has thrown a wrench into the works for many tech companies. So This law, which changes how research and development, or R&D, expenses are treated, came into effect right as mass layoffs began. Previously, companies could fully expense R&D costs, including developer salaries, in the year that they were incurred. Now they must capitalize and amortize these expenses over 5 years. This shift to significantly increase the tax liability of tech companies, contributing to the widespread layoff. So again, this article does a really good job of going into it. And, again, this article is a little bit old, and so, kind of surprising that we haven't heard a little bit more about this. But so he did some research after, the Wall Street Journal and a handful of other news outlets covered the changes. He still found founders reaching out to share its feelings, like public awareness is low about just how large a problem this tax change is. So, let's see here. He goes into, so he kind of explains the same thing right here, and we can use this to talk a little bit about this. So let me make sure that this is showing pretty good. So I'm going to make this a little bit bigger here and move my head here. So let's say that you had $1 million revenue in 2021. Software engineering labor cost was $1 million, of which the deductible was the financial year. $1 million, you'd be break even, right? This is kind of what my commenter was commenting on. 2022, Section 174 changes. You have $1 million revenue, $1 million software engineering labor. Tax deductible is only $100,000. Profits $900,000. Corporate taxes due $189,000, right? And that's due immediately in 2023. Then you have Section 174 as $1 million, of which is deductible $300,000 because you got 10% from this year and 20% from last year, and so now your corporate tax liability is $147. Now, so the less hiring and everything is going to be definitely hit by this. So I want to read this part because this part I thought really kind of helped explain. It was one of the best explanations I could find. So what are Section 174 changes? We need to go back some years to understand. In 2017, then President Donald Trump signed the 2017 Tax Cut and Jobs Act, which overhauled tax code and reduced taxes. For example, it reduced the top bracket from 39.6 to 37. To make the bill pass strict budgetary rules, the Senate used a process called reconciliation, adding in tax code changes that delayed tax increases. These delayed increases balanced out the tax reduction. One of these changes was Section 174, set to come into effect 5 years later in 2022. These parts deliver the blow by making it clear that software development costs need to be amortized over 5 to 15 years. Most experts expect Congress to push back the Section 174 amendment to a later date or simply remove it, but congressional negotiations to repeal the change fell apart at the last minute in December 2022, meaning it became law. So this is how it happened. And so why did big tech or VCs not raise the alarm? Well, we did not hear the large tech companies protesting the tax change. Actually, several did, but their protests failed to cut through on the news agenda. Large tech companies tend to speak up about issues like this via coalitions, trade associations, and lobbyists. Amazon, Microsoft, Intel, Ford, Lockheed Martin, and other companies created the U.S. R&D Coalition in 2018 to advocate in reversing this change. This group concludes, and he goes on to read this here, right? Here's how Section 174 change impacted some companies based on what I found in their annual reports. Microsoft, $4.8 billion additional tax paid in 2023. Company generated $72 billion that year, so the tax increase was manageable. It's still a very large amount, so $4 billion addition. Netflix, $386 million. Google, tax change was minimal because Google voluntarily amortized software developer expense for most staff already. This was for all projects that reached technological, so Google didn't really complain about it. So this is really bad because what is it doing? Less hiring of software developers in the U.S. and more layoffs, firing of non-U.S. engineers employed by U.S. companies. It's a boon for SaaS companies and vendors. U.S. software companies now have a strong reason to buy instead of build software in-house. In February last year, we covered, it makes a lot less sense to incorporate tech startups in the U.S., and startup software IP will likely be moved out of the U.S. So this particular writer is, predicting that we'll see a lot more foreign countries that are still allowing people to write this off. Creative workarounds like inversion buying. Say that you run a U.S. company with a Canadian subsidiary, with most development working in Canada. So he kind of goes through that. So anyways, this is an interesting article. I'll definitely include this into my comments, to the section down below. So you can go and hit that section and take a look at it. But I do think that in my research, the impact of Section 174 is more severe when projects flop, as we went through. Now, the situation is even worse for companies with non-U.S. developers. In such cases, the taxable income rate can be as high as 95%. This places an even greater financial burden on companies, making it almost impossible to sustain large teams or ambitious projects. So in the past, they've just been so used to being able to write off R&D costs. Now, during the COVID-19 pandemic, many tech companies overstaffed, buoyed by government support and an optimistic outlook. However, as the pandemic subsided and the reality of Section 174 set in, these companies found themselves with unsustainable payrolls. Coupled with the new tax burden, this overstaffing has led to a wave of layoffs that we've seen over the last 2 years as companies scrambled to adjust to the new financial landscape. Now, as you'll notice from this grid, right, the more years we get into this, even if it doesn't get repealed, the less impact it's going to have on companies, right? Because this 10 and 20% here, right, are going to get to be able to start rolling over. So you'll get 20% from the year before, 20%, because you're going to amortize it across 5 years. And so you'll start feeling that, like, this first and second year is when you're really going to feel it the most. As large corporations, this starts to level off over years. It's still bad and it still needs to go away. But it'll start to, but this will start to, to level off. So this is part of the reason. So the financial strain caused by Section 174 has broader implications for innovation. Companies are now more hesitant to invest in R&D, fearing the potential tax burden. This could stifle innovation and slow down technology as companies prioritize financial stability over ambitious projects. So the long-term impact on tech industry could be significant with fewer groundbreaking developments and a more cautious approach to innovation. So there's a growing call for Congress to address this issue caused by Section 174. Many industry leaders and advocacy groups are pushing for a repeal to this law. They argue that current tax treatment of R&D expenses is untenable and that it's hindering the growth and competitiveness of the U.S. tech markets. By addressing these concerns, Congress would help alleviate the financial pressure on tech companies and prevent future layoffs. By doing this, there would be a sudden rollback of all of that work, right? And so, as I looked out over this, as I started to research this, it was kind of interesting because there really is, this is repeal Section 174 to end layoffs, save tech jobs. This was 3 months ago, right? Contact your state senate, right? So that's definitely one of the things that everybody who's watching this video needs to do. We really need to go and be able to allow them to be able to write this down. Just because this is going to really hurt. It's really going to hurt mid companies. A lot of these larger companies amortize and do a lot of crazy things, like you saw Google was doing anyways. And for a lot of reasons, they may do this anyways. They do a lot of creative accounting. But to mitigate the impact of Section 174, companies need to adopt strategic measures. This could include lobbying for legislation change, optimizing their R&D spending, and exploring new alternative funding sources. So additionally, tech companies can focus on upskilling their existing workforce to increase productivity and reduce the need for new hires. Now, this is one of the things that I really advocate for here at StartupHakk. We love training software developers, and I can take any of your employees, and in 3 months, I can take them and teach them how to code. They'll get a one-on-one tutor. We give them the program. They'll be off and running, and by the time they're done, they'll have their own Azure setup and be able to actually build applications. So one of the simplest ways is, instead of hiring expensive developers, take your existing employees and teach them how to code. Give them a 20% raise. They'll be ecstatic, and you're getting a developer who knows your business for very inexpensive cost. Win, win, win. I'm a firm believer in this, and here at StartupHakk, we're set up exactly for that. And if you're in the state of Arizona, that gets even better. But we'll talk a little more about that later. But this is one of the ways that you can take to do that, and you won't even see that any difference because you're already paying that employee. And so I'm seeing a lot of different people talking about this. I do think this has definitely impacted our layoffs. This is definitely something that we have seen as as one of the big reasons. Now, my hope is that, and so let me go to my camera here. So I kind of went through this a little bit more detail yesterday, but we saw this wave, right? Because in 2022 is when it was starting to hit, and people started to realize that as they started to file corporate taxes, and we saw the layoffs happen, right? So the opening of tech jobs dramatically went down as people started to figure that out. In 2023, we saw a low. Then we're starting to see them creep back up because, again, where's my chart here? By that second and third year, they're starting to feel from the previous years. And so they're going to feel that. So by the end of this year and going into next year, they're already going to be amortizing those costs across the multiple years, and we'll see less of this. Also, coupled with the guaranteed rate cuts that should be coming in September, money will get cheaper as well. And so as money gets cheap, R&D becomes something that's worth spending on, and people are willing to take these projects off the shelf and to work on them. And so I think we're going to continue to see the job market rebound. That's my prediction. I think these waves of massive layoffs are over. I think we might see a slight slowdown in hiring indefinitely. But I think what will happen is that over time, we're going to see that continue to grow back. Companies are going to still need to develop. I know there's off-the-shelf products, but the company that we're working for now has 12 different products. They're a small company. They keep trying to buy more and more products rather than getting a development team and working to put these together to build out their IP. So my prediction is that we'll still be need for developers. We're going to see that need continue to increase. And that's why here at StartupHakk, we'd love to train software developers. We can take anybody from your staff, help to train them to become ready to start in as little as 3 months. We also love to help companies build custom software solutions. So if you want us to come in and train one of your employees, we can do that in the coding bootcamp. And then as soon as they're done, we can help to consult them as they build out the technology into your teams. So reach out because we'd love to help. I've helped a lot of companies do this. So hit the links down below. Check out StartupHakk.com today. You can go to the Contact Us link. You can also go to StartupHakk.com/Spencer. And this is also directly where I work as a fractional CTO to do exactly this work. So hopefully something I've said has been helpful. Make sure you reach out to your Congress and senators to let them know that we need to repeal Section 174, get their act together, work across the aisle, and on both sides, and try to get this repealed, because this is devastating to the U.S. economy for software developers, and it's devastating for medium-sized businesses that want to be able to file for the R&D tax credit. So definitely make sure you reach out. And otherwise, and as always, this whole video came because somebody made a comment on my video. So go and make a comment on my videos. I love to get comments. I love to have discussions. Somebody left me a huge novel of comments that I'm going to go through on Monday and break it all down, and because it was just this really well thought out argument. So otherwise, we will catch you guys next time. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, because we bring you lots of great tutorials and tips that every developer should know. See you next time.